Other people need to know in the legal system that, you know, Alcoa needs to be held accountable for the people that are sick, going to be getting sick, you know, that will become sick, that have died. You know, they've been getting away with this for a long time.
When I met my husband, he was very, very healthy and loving and caring, and he really wants to work back because he feels bad for me for working so hard.
It's hard for me as a man. You know, there's complications and just our intimacy, a lot of things. I don't have the stamina that I used to have. It's really hard. I feel bad for her. She takes it very well. It's totally changed me.
We suffered every day. I just live paycheck to paycheck. And our medical just went up high and high and high for him and my kids and all that. And thank God that we are make it through every day.
You know, we had wedding rings. I bought a set for me and my wife, and even her first engagement ring. We had to pawn them. She lost them. You know, it's been rough.
They can't just let them suffer and get away with this, because there's people out there dying and they left their loved ones for nothing to provide them when they're dying.
Every business, regardless of its size, must provide its employees with safe working conditions. And considering the range of potential hazards, from asbestos to slippery stairs to excessive noise, that can be difficult for a small business. And why should everyone be so concerned about job safety and health? Because each year, approximately 6,000 employees in this country die from workplace injuries, while another 50,000 die from illnesses caused by exposure to workplace hazards. In addition, 6 million workers suffer non-fatal workplace injuries at an annual cost to U.S. businesses of more than $125 billion. Standards and rules for safe working conditions, tools, equipment, facilities, and processes are set by the Labor Department's Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. OSHA standards apply to every private employer with one or more employees, except for those in industries covered by other federal job safety legislation. Today, roughly 93 million employees across the country are protected by state and federal OSHA programs. But even with adequate safety measures, accidents do happen. In this Insider exclusive Investigative Network TV special, our news team goes behind the headlines in this Justice in America TV special, Workers' Safety, Neil Hornsby's story, to examine how Julie Anderson of the Julie Anderson Law Firm is fighting for justice for Neil Hornsby. In July of 2000, Neil was hired by Alcoa Wenatchee Works in Wenatchee, Washington, to work in Alcoa's pot rooms where aluminum is manufactured, and it's very dangerous and hazardous. Neil was not informed of the hazards from exposures in the everyday workplace at Alcoa prior to employment. The pot rooms are the heart of the smelting process. It is here that the molten aluminum is produced. By 2005, Neil Hornsby collapsed at Alcoa from heat stress. Alcoa was aware that heat stress from the pot rooms causes heart damage, and Alcoa did not warn Neil that continued exposure to the extreme heat in those pot rooms would cause further heart damage. Neil has been diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis, heart disease, and aluminum lung, and he no longer can work. Neil's lawyer, Julie Anderson, will share with us today the extraordinary challenges facing dedicated, permanently injured workers when trying to get justice when challenging Alcoa to do the right thing to take care of their employees, as well as the hurdles injured workers face in Washington State's workers' compensation law. Julie has earned the highest respect from citizens and lawyers alike as one of the best trial lawyers in Washington State and in the nation. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Wenatchee, Washington. my great pleasure to introduce Julie Anderson to the show. Welcome to the show, Julie.
Thank you very much.
You live in this wonderful city of Wenatchee.
Yes.
Practice law here.
Yes.
What kind of cases do you generally handle?
Well, I'm on the litigation side, so most of the kind of cases I do are cases that end up in court, fighting in court.
Right.
I do some criminal defense. I had a murder case last year. I also do some custody cases, but I also have some personal injury cases and other cases like this that are L&I cases.
Medical cases, too.
Yes.
Medical malpractice.
I have a pretty big variety of cases that I
Yeah.
do.
So today we are here because you have a client who's a wonderful client. His name is Neil Hornsby. Tell our audience a little bit about Neil.
Neil is a very smart person. He was a very hard worker up to the point of getting injured at Alcoa. And he's very proud, and he's very upset that he can't work anymore.
Yeah. What did he do at Alcoa?
He was in the pot rooms, and
It's a smelting room.
yes,
correct? Yeah.
yes. And he was in very high heat and lifting 300 pounds at a time. He's a big guy. He was extremely strong, and he was one of the leads in the pot rooms because he was so good.
So when you say he got hurt, what exactly happened to him? How was he injured?
Well, he actually got sick.
Yes.
And he started working in about 2000. By about 2005, he didn't know what was wrong with him, but he started having some stomach problems and different things like that. Started missing work, and it gradually got worse. At one point, he ended up dropping on the job from heat stress and going to the hospital. And the other thing that was happening is that every year Alcoa tests the pulmonary function of a person, and his pulmonary function was starting to decline. And Alcoa did not really advise him that they knew why it was declining, and specifically, it was declining because the amount of aluminum and in powdered form that's in the pot rooms.
You're talking about like in the dust, in the air.
Yes, in the
now,
air.
They're required to wear masks. They have some safety equipment, don't they?
They did have some safety equipment, but they didn't always have it available.
Okay.
They did not
So
follow.
they didn't have enough masks.
Sometimes they didn't have enough masks, and sometimes they didn't have the right filters for the mask. And sometimes they had cheap masks that they would use rather than the really good ones that they should have been using.
So he was diagnosed, I think, with one disease, pulmonary fibrosis, correct?
Yes.
Okay. We've done shows, as you well know, where people have worked in Alcoa plants around aluminum, and sometimes they come down with mesothelioma or asbestosis. What is the difference between pulmonary fibrosis and the other two diseases?
Well, mesothelioma, my understanding is usually comes from asbestos.
Yeah.
And there was actually asbestos in the pot rooms here at the Wenatchee Alcoa plant.
Okay.
We don't know if he has mesothelioma because when they biopsied his lungs were so fragile that they could only take a small portion.
Yeah.
And so there are some other things going wrong with him right now,
Yeah.
but the local people can't test him for that yet.
Right.
They're going to probably have to send him back to Virginia.
But as a result of his decline in health, he has also suffered a heart attack, is that correct?
Yes, he's had a heart attack.
And he's 51, right?
Yes, and I think he had 3 strokes last year also.
Really?
Yeah.
And going for further tests would be kind of hazardous to his health right now.
Well, testing his lungs would be hazardous because his lungs are so fragile now.
Yeah.
He's being told that he needs a double lung transplant.
Wow. Did he resign from the job, or he just couldn't work anymore?
He resigned
Okay.
because
and,
he was having a lot of absenteeism.
Right. And then you came into the picture because he said, I think as a result of working at Alcoa, I've gotten these certain diseases.
At the time, he didn't know what diseases he had because
Yeah.
his lungs hadn't been biopsied yet. But yes, he knew he was sick,
Yeah.
and he was sure it was from Alcoa. But at the time, we didn't know if it was one of about 5 things that you can get in those pot rooms.
So when he came to you, all of a sudden you see, this man was injured on the job, and you contacted Alcoa and eventually ended up filing a suit, correct?
Right. We filed the L&I claim first.
Okay. And what is that?
That's just a standard claim that a person who is a worker in Washington would file if they're injured or get a disease on the job.
Okay, so you filed it with the Washington State Workers' Compensation.
Department of Labor and Industries.
Okay,
Yes.
and so you have you had 2 ongoing suits, correct? One against Alcoa
well-
and a claim against the Washington Workers' Compensation Board.
Well, it's really against Alcoa. It's
Yeah.
just that the Washington compensation system is a system that the employers pay into.
Yeah.
And so when there is a claim that is allowed,
Yeah.
they pay.
But they didn't in this case, did
They did not.
And why not?
They said that his pulmonary fibrosis was not related to his work at Alcoa.
Okay, and how can they say that? I mean, I've been wondering this every time I read the case, because he has fiberglass fibers
Yes.
in his lungs.
Yes, he has
How'd they get there?
aluminum in his lungs.
Aluminum.
And when the doctor biopsied his lungs and did a report,
Yeah.
he said that this is not something, this aluminum that
Yeah.
is in his lungs is not something that's in the normal population.
Right.
But what Alcoa did was say, well, Mr. Hornsby's a smoker.
Right.
And
This
when-
is what their lawyers said.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when they apply for Alcoa, they have to fill out a form, and that's one of the first questions they ask.
Are you a smoker?
Are you a smoker? And yes, he was a smoker off and on. Sometimes he quit. Sometimes he did a half a pack. Sometimes he was up to 2 packs a day. And so that he did have a history of smoking, and that was their sole defense that his disease was caused by smoking, not by the aluminum that's in his lungs.
Okay, but Alcoa stuck with their story that he got the aluminum in his lungs from smoking. Are there
They
cigarettes?
did, and
Are there
they-
cigarettes that have aluminum in them?
They had no expert that could say that.
Mm-hmm.
They did have a couple of experts that talked about smoking and the diseases that it could cause, but
Right.
when it came right down to it, neither expert could say.
Yeah.
Well, number one, they didn't even know what kind of cigarettes you smoked.
Yes.
Number one. Number two, there was no evidence that they were experts on what the ingredients in smoke.
Yeah.
In smoking. So they were just sort of ad-libbing and really had no proof whatsoever.
So talk to us about the state of your lawsuit right now against Alcoa.
Okay. So
And the Washington Workers' Compensation claim.
okay. So the Washington Workers' Compensation claim was our first claim.
Yes.
It went all the way through a trial in front of a judge in Chelan County. He found that even though he found that the aluminum in his lungs was caused by working at the pot rooms at Alcoa, he also found that he did not believe that that was what caused his disease,
Despite the evidence.
despite the evidence.
Okay.
We had over 1,000 pages of transcript.
And you have appealed that, have you not?
And that is on appeal right now.
And that's the state of that
That's the
claim.
Washington State Court of
What
Appeals.
about Alcoa?
Now, we filed a separate claim after that case was on appeal under Washington law for something that's called an intentional injury lawsuit. And that's
Against Alcoa.
against Alcoa. That case was dismissed, and we've appealed that case.
Dismissed for what reason?
It was dismissed because the judge indicated that the complaint did not sufficiently allege the intentional injury lawsuit, which, yes, it did. It was, we had a lot of
So,
evidence.
Let me ask you one thing. Is there enough scientific evidence to show that working under his conditions would have caused his condition?
Absolutely. Alcoa has been studying
So why
pot
is-
room diseases since
Yeah.
World War II.
So why is the judge denying your claim?
It's hard for me to understand, but one of the realities of this case is that Alcoa is one of the biggest employers and one of the best employers as far as rate
Yeah.
of pay
Yeah.
in this valley. And a lot of families in this valley depend on Alcoa.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there was some political influence there that this would not be a good thing to have a claim founded against Alcoa.
Right, okay. I understand we have your client Neil and his wife here, so let's bring them on right now. It is my great pleasure to introduce Neil Hornsby and his wife Marcor. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Tell our audience a little bit about how your life has changed now that you can't work at Alcoa and all of the medical problems you've had.
I've had 3 strokes, 1 heart attack.
You had 3 strokes last year, didn't you?
Yeah.
Okay. Heart attack was how long ago?
It was at the end of last year. This is
Wow.
last year. I had one.
How are you feeling today?
I'm get tired.
Yeah.
You know.
Very fatigued, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can tell my body's slowing down, and
Yes.
just things aren't like they used to be.
Now, Marcor, how has this affected your life? Because you're not working right now, right, Neil?
No.
Your home, you've had reduced income coming in, correct?
Drastically reduced.
So how has that affected your life, your standard of living?
It's affected really bad, and it's hard.
Yeah.
And working every day to support my family.
You work.
Yeah, I
Wh-
work.
What do you do?
I work in the deli clerk at Safeway
Okay.
in East Side, and living every paycheck to paycheck.
Yes.
And
You have
then-
2 kids, right?
I have my own 2 kids,
Right.
14.
They live with you.
Yeah, they live with us.
Okay.
And come home and prepare dinner, lunch for them, and pretty much I do a lot of housework.
Yeah. What about your medical needs now at home? Are you taking anything, or do you have to do some sort of exercise, or what are you doing right now for your condition?
Well, I'm on oxygen. I'm on 5 liters, which is basically the maximum that you can be on.
And you take that throughout the day
And when I'm sleeping.
and when you're sleeping.
Yeah.
At night.
And if you were not to take it, you would suffer some dire consequences, right?
Well, yeah, you can pass in your sleep. My oxygen level drops drastically.
Yeah.
Because due to the damage to my lung.
How long do you say 5 liters? How long is that administered over what period of time?
That's continuous when I'm sleeping.
Yeah.
Anytime I'm relaxing, possible, when I do fall asleep, or you
Yeah.
know, I have to be on it.
Now, prior to this case, you were a robust, very healthy individual. You worked at Alcoa for what, almost 6 years, correct?
Yeah, well, longer than that.
Yeah.
I worked there for over 8 years
Yeah.
total.
And you also worked up in Alaska, correct?
Right.
So
After-
you've been a strong individual. You know, you've had these demanding jobs, and now you really can't do what you're so used to doing anymore. How does that affect you mentally and emotionally?
It's hard.
Yeah.
You know, people will refer me to as a bull in a china cabinet. You know, years ago. You know, at one time even when I was working at Alcoa, I was about 287 pounds and about 4% body fat.
Wow. What are you now? How much do you weigh?
I'm about 260 pounds.
Wow. Okay.
But-
Now, prior to this situation and these legal suits, you had never been involved with the justice system, have you?
No,
What's your opinion of the justice system now?
it is drastically changed.
Okay. In what way?
Due to the fact that, you know, you always want to believe in the system that is there to help people, you know, and you know, bring justice to,
Yeah.
to situations where justice needs to be
Yeah.
brought, you know. You want to have faith in everything they do, but with the way things have turned out so far, you know, you lose a lot of that because they're not there for you.
In speaking with your lawyer, I asked her one question, you know, have there been other cases where people worked at Alcoa came down with pulmonary fibrosis? The evidence was there to show the connection. Did they successfully win their lawsuits? And she said yes. So it must be really frustrating to both of you to have the same kind of conditions and the evidence, right? The evidence, and have the court deny your ability to be able to compensate you for the injury that was caused while you were on the job, right?
Right. Well, one of the briefs, they even said that they believed that I became sick. One of
Yeah.
the judges wrote a summary and said that they believe I became sick due to the exposures at Alcoa, but there wasn't enough
Yeah.
there. You know, I mean, you know, I'm sitting here wasting away, you know, worried about if I'm going to be around for my grandkids and my family
Yes.
in the future, you know. And in fact, one of the attorneys asked me during my deposition, had asked me how I was feeling. And I told him, I says, you want to know how I'm feeling? I said, you go home to your family, you sit everybody around, and you tell them that you might be dying. And then you come back and you tell me how I feel. The court reporter started crying.
Yeah. No, I understand that you need right now a lung transplant. Is that right?
Both lungs.
And you need a heart transplant, correct?
Yes.
So if you were not to get that, what is your outlook?
I'll die.
When?
It's hard to say. You know, I'm doing better than what most people would be because of the shape I was in before I got sick.
Yeah.
So it just depends on how my body holds up.
Julie has fought long and hard for your case. I saw the boxes out in her office. What's your opinion of her law firm and the efforts that she's put forth so far?
She is a very fighter lawyer, and she want us to make sure that we win this case to provide us before anything happened to him.
I've never seen, and I've done a lot of these shows, I've never seen the closeness between clients and a lawyer as you guys have. And thank God she's handling your case, and we wish you success in getting the appeal decided in your favor.
Thank you.
Okay, and I want to thank both of you for being on the program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It seems to me that workers in this state have certain conditions they have to meet if they have a claim against their employer, right?
They do, and especially if it's an intentional injury case.
Okay. What are them? You know.
Well, the intentional injury case is a very hard case to make because normally it's a no-fault state.
Yeah.
But if you want to prove damages in excess of the Labor and Industries compensation plan, you have to prove intentional injury.
So, in other words, what you're saying is that a injured person has to prove that their employer was aware that, let's say, a safety violation or something was occurring and chose not to help protect the employee.
Basically, yes.
Well, that's kind of a high standard, isn't it?
It's an extremely high standard, and the way Washington courts have interpreted that statute, it's almost impossible to prove, because you have to prove that the employer had actual knowledge that the injury was certain to occur and willfully disregarded that knowledge. But we can prove that in this case.
You can?
Yes.
And how can you prove it in this
We can
case?
prove it in this case because they took tests on Mr. Hornsby from the very beginning. Every year they take tests.
And showed he was very healthy.
Very healthy, excellent health. And when he started, he had perfect pulmonary function, he had perfect heart function. Over the years, and starting in about 2005, his tests started to show a decline. He collapsed on the job from heat stress.
Yeah.
They gave him nitro for his heart, which Alcoa gets all these records because they actually sent him to the hospital, and they get all these records. And so they knew that his function was starting to decline, and they knew why it was declining because they've done research for years specifically about pulmonary fibrosis. On their website, they affiliate themselves with the Aluminum Institute. The Aluminum Institute has done a massive study on pulmonary diseases and specifically cases about pot rooms.
So that evidence having on the website shows that they're aware.
They're aware, they've been studying it. They even put on their website certain pot room diseases like heart disease from heat and from aluminum. So they know all this. So even though Mr. Hornsby didn't know why he was getting sick, Alcoa knew.
Yeah.
And they didn't tell him.
If you're a worker in the state of Washington, what are your rights?
Well, your rights
when
are...
it comes to when you get injured, what are your rights?
Your rights are that if you're injured on the job or if you get a disease related to the job, you file a claim within a year of that injury or disease.
Yeah, and a lot of those claims never get approved.
Many do.
Because of this intentional...
Many do. I think because Mr. Hornsby's case was involving extremely serious disease requiring lung transplant, there was an incentive because of the huge cost that was going to be involved there to deny it.
You have a lot of people contact you regarding some of their potential legal problems. How do you select the cases that you want to spend time on?
Well, I interview the person and I look at what their evidence is. And with injury or disease cases, they need a medical expert.
Yeah.
Mr. Hornsby, pretty early on in my representation, had his lungs biopsied.
Yes.
And those biopsies ultimately were sent to New York, Dr. Abraham, who's one of the most renowned doctors in this field.
Yeah.
And
so you saw the evidence.
His lungs are filled with aluminum.
Yeah. Well, we certainly hope on appeal that the courts look at the evidence a lot better than they're doing, and certainly hope that you're able to successfully get justice for Neil.
Thank you.
I want to thank you very much for being on the show, and we wish you much success with Neil's case. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.